First of all, introducing our challenger.
Out of the blue corner.
He's going to step in and he does. It's all over.
Let's bring on the boom.
This is Eternal MMA.
Right, everyone, welcome back and thank you for joining us here once again on another edition of the Eternal Insiders Podcast, powered by Fight HQ, the official uniform partner for Eternal MMA. As you can see, we are once again being joined by Matt Bones Williams. We are here to talk about that massive double-header card coming up next weekend on the Gold Coast, kicking off November 29 for Eternal MMA 90 and Eternal MMA 91, back-to-back, an absolute stellar weekend for mixed martial arts. We've already broken down the fights on Eternal 90, here today to talk about Eternal 91. Matt, long time no speak, brother. It's been, a whole 24 hours. So how are things with you, man? It's a nice early start to the morning. I know you've got a busy schedule today, so thanks for your time. How are you, man?
Yeah, mate, so happy to be back. Love talking shop, especially if it's anything to do with Eternal MMA. Woke up, the birds are chirping, the dog's farting. It's business as usual down here in Torquay, mate. Ready to get the ball rolling.
The dog's farting. What sort of dog are you harbouring? That's farting. What do we got there?
I've got a pug. You know, they say that dogs look like their owners. I'm not quite sure that's true.
That's called that's a Bowser. That's what that is. That movie, I Love You Man, taught me that. So if you look like your dog, they're called Bowsers. So that's what you got going on with the pug thing.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, nice.
So that's me.
Nice. That's a nice way to start your morning, man, down there in sunny Torquay. So it's a little bit the same down here in my neck of the woods too. So we've got a good day. We're stuck inside talking about the fights though, and I'm very happy to do that. Like we said, we kicked off yesterday. We're talking about Eternal 90, and we move in today talking about Eternal 91. Huge card, couple of title fights on that one, headlined by John Martin Fraser versus Darcy Vendy for the vacant middleweight title. Now, of course, that title is being contested as a vacant title due to the fact that we did have our former champion, Ben Johnston, hang up his gloves recently after an incredible career fighting in Muay Thai and then giving it a red-hot crack in mixed martial arts as well. Ben Johnston, of course, former Australian Muay Thai champion, former world Muay Thai champion, decided to give this thing in mixed martial arts a real red-hot crack. 12 years after making his mixed martial arts debut back in 2010, went on his Muay Thai run, decided to come back, at Eternal 64 against Caleb Rideout, and what would be a loss for Ben, but since then he went on to win his next 4 fights, all by way of finish. Incredibly enough, 3 of those 4 finishes came by way of rear naked choke submission. Not bad for a storied Muay Thai veteran. Ultimately, that would go on to culminate in him capturing the middleweight title against John Martin Fraser with a rear naked choke in the second round. At Eternal 83, we know that Ben harbored ambitions for wanting to fight internationally. He made no secret that he wanted to give us a crack in the UFC. And ultimately, after putting the feelers out, was told that the UFC probably wasn't going to be looking at him. Always said that he didn't want to keep doing this locally if it was going to be a matter of not getting any international opportunities. He'd like to just keep focusing on his gym, focus on his coaching. And so he has decided to call it a career. But absolutely hats off to Ben Johnston. Incredible man, incredible fighter. Incredible amount of accomplishments that he's had through the sports of Muay Thai and mixed martial arts in the short run that he's had there. So Ben, all the best in retirement, mate. Hats off to you, brother. All the best in what comes next for you. Can't say enough about the man. Looking forward to see what he does next.
Yeah, absolutely. Had the pleasure of watching some fights with Ben Johnston up on the Gold Coast, some Muay Thai fights, and absolute stand-up bloke. So I wasn't surprised to see that he cleared the way for when he heard he wasn't, due to his age, he wasn't going to be getting the nod up to the UFC to clear the way for other guys to come through. Really selfless act. And, you mentioned the rear naked chokes. The rear naked chokes without hooks too. That kind of became his little trademark.
Right, yeah, that is a very good point, yes.
Not bad for a Muay Thai guy, hey?
Not bad at all, man. Yeah, it's incredible. And I think it got mentioned like every time he pulled at the sub, like how many times is he just going to keep doing this? Like you think he's going to be finishing all these fights in the feet. So it just shows what an absolutely multifaceted martial artist that he was, through his career. So, I don't know him personally as a coach, but I've got no doubt he's an incredible coach. How much sort of time have you spent with Ben? Like, have you had the chance to mix it up with him at all in terms of any kind of training or anything like that? Or has it just kind of been from the sidelines, or what's your sort of experience with Ben?
Yeah, no, just in passing at that one event, but obviously being a fan of the Muay Thai, I was aware of him coming up on his WBC days, making some big waves up there in Queensland. Watched quite a few of his fights. Yeah, and really excited to see what he does next with the fight center. It's going absolutely gangbusters, mate. They're going to need their own postcode out there, and look for him to take all that experience that he's gathered through his days back, starting at Iron Fist, and his time over at CKB, helping guys like Israel Adesanya, who I know said that Ben was a massive part of his title preparations, and seeing what he can do now, just worrying about his students with the coach's hat on.
No, once again, hats off to Ben Johnson, and all the best in what he does for the next phase of his career. But he leaves behind the middleweight title to be contested by John Martin Fraser versus Darcy Vendy. Of course, Darcy Vendy training out of the fight center as well. So that is an interesting little point coming up in this fight. We talk about John Martin Fraser. Of course, John is a former two-time Eternal MMA middleweight champion and just an absolute finisher of the highest order. He's a bad man, is John Martin Fraser. 7 of his 8 wins coming by way of finish, all by his hands. So he's not mixing up any subs like Ben Johnson. Everything is up here with old John Martin Fraser, all KOs and TKOs for his stoppage wins in his career. Title wins over the likes of Kit Campbell, Beast, Brogan Anderson most recently. The last time he won the title, another beast in 2021 and 2023 respectively. He did go on to lose his title, of course, against Matt Myers, but he did get that title back when he beat Brogan Anderson, of course, in his last title win. He then obviously lost that title, like we said, with the aforementioned Ben Johnson in that fight, but he has recently bounced back with an incredible win over Alfred Stoddard back in September at Eternal 88. Just classic John Martin Fraser, another barrage of strikes, put the lights out on Alfred Stoddard. He's made no secret of his ambitions for fighting in the UFC either. He's 8-4 in his career at this point, so he can't afford any more setbacks. But as he said on the podcast with me a couple of times, this is his absolute life. There's no plan A, B, C, or D. He knows this is very much go time at the age of 32, and it all starts when he takes on Darcy Vendy for that middleweight title. That fight was already booked as the main event, but we just get the sprinkle on top of that title being vacated by Ben Johnston. And Darcy Vendy, as we mentioned too there before, training out of the fight center. He's coming in off his own 3-fight winning streak. So a good amount of momentum there. He last appeared for Eternal MMA with a win over Jack James at Eternal 63. Some fans might not know this, but Darcy Vendy actually holds a win over Jack Della Maddalena. They were both 0-1 at the time, so this is way back when. But he was the last man to actually beat Jack Della Maddalena before Jack really became Jack and has gone on that incredible run of wins and hasn't sort of looked back since. So some fascinating storylines coming into this fight, not least the fact that there appears to be a lot of bad blood coming into this one. John really dislikes Darcy by the looks of it. It has to be said. Says that he respects Darcy as a fighter, but certainly not as a man. According to John, he believes that Darcy turned down a fight when he offered to step in on a couple of weeks' notice recently when Darcy lost a fight. But believe that Darcy was suggesting that John was just trying to catch him out. But this caused John to believe that Darcy is a coward of a man, in his words. So he's got some extra incentive. It's not just about the belt. It's not just making the UFC. He wants to put hands on Darcy Vendy, and I'm sure that Darcy's feeling the same way about John Martin Fraser. So we've got an epic clash at the top of the billing for Eternal 91, and very keen to get your thoughts on this one, Matt Williams.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? And you love a little bit of drama, don't you? Especially when there's an angry Welshman involved. And
nothing better.
Darcy Vendy's a straight shooter in his own right too, and is not short of confidence, that bloke. He's made some big calls on the mic before, reckons that he could take the top of the division in the UFC, no problems on his day. But that kind of confidence can be weaponized inside the cage, and that's something that Darcy's managed to do really well over the course of his career so far. There's a lot of questions for me that need answering in this fight. Luke, what will John Martin Fraser look like now that he's at Team Compton? Like, what improvements has he been able to make? What new skills has he been able to add to his already ferocious striking arsenal? As you mentioned, 88% of his wins are coming by way of KO. So you can imagine now in that room of killers, and with guys like Blair Brettag, another middleweight, to be able to spar with. He could have only improved. What does Vindy look like now at the top of the division? Like there's probably something to say that John Fraser's schedule has been a lot stronger over the years than that of Darcy Vindy. Like you say, his last fight in Eternals with Jack James. Well, his last fight was versus the veteran Abel Bright, who back in his day he was an absolute gun, but is coming off a number of consecutive losses and is probably past his prime a little bit. And before that, I think for Vindy, it was Alfred Stoddard on debut. So just not really the strength of schedule that John Martin Fraser's had. So what does he look like at the top of the division? And if then there's these interesting little storylines at play, like if John Martin Fraser wins, like who's next? If Blair Brettag wins, then what happens at the top of the division? Do we get another traffic jam like we had with Ben Johnson and Darcy Vindy coming up? But I'll tell you what, if Darcy Vindy can get the job done and Blair Brettag does, that'll set up quite nicely. But yeah, a lot of really interesting questions that need to be answered about this one.
Certainly a lot of interesting questions. And of course, we talked before about John Martin Fraser still harbouring the ambitions to make a run at the UFC. I know that Dana White's been on record saying he's not sort of too interested in taking guys that are sort of 30 plus years of age. We're seeing a lot of guys that are having decent careers, well into sort of their late 30s and some even in their early 40s. How realistic is it a possibility, do you think, for John at this point in his career? I mean, we're actually riding a little bit of a Welsh surge at the moment. We had O'Brien Elliott have an incredible win at the last UFC event. So I'm thinking like we can capitalize on some real new introduction for new fans out of the Welsh part of the world. Maybe John can sort of capitalize on something like that and make his own little run. But just curious if you think that this is still a realistic possibility for John if he gets a big win in this fight.
Yeah, well, actions speak louder than words. I think actions speak louder than words. And, if he could shut Vindy out and come out hard and fast like he always does. He always comes out pursuing the finish. That's just the only way he fights. He's never looking to get the judges involved. He's looking to get the doctor involved. And that kind of temperament, that kind of approach to fighting really serves him well. And getting into the book of the matchmakers. I also think, like, as you go up through the weight classes, the heavier weight classes, they're more inclined to take on guys in their 30s as opposed to the lighter weight classes. We saw on the weekend in the UFC, we saw a 42-year-old fight a 38-year-old for the heavyweight championship of the world. It's supposed to be the baddest man in the planet. And so I think, age carries more currency at the heavier weight classes. So Martin Fraser will be looking to shut out the likes of Indy and make himself undeniable down the track.
Now, of course, you're a coach as well, so you have some intimate knowledge in terms of, like, the nuances in terms of preparing for fights and preparing fighters for fights. We just mentioned before from Darcy Vindy, he, of course, trains at the Fight Centre with Ben Johnson. Given that Ben has a win over John Martin Fraser in a title fight, how much, can you quantify that in terms of an advantage that is for Darcy Vindy, given that he has a coach that has not only been able to break down John as an opponent from a coach's perspective, has physically fought him? Like, how much of an advantage is that for Darcy Vindy? Can that be overstated, or is it not really as big as maybe people think?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And, I think with, like I mentioned, with John Martin Fraser, he fights one way. He fights going forward with pressure and trying to knock you out from the start. So that's a given. He's super unlikely to change that tactic. So the tactic can be prepared for. Ben Johnson would have had a blueprint that he used to approach the fights that was well studied. So there's like a body of work that's already been undertaken. Probably psychologically, there's probably a couple little advantages there for Vindy too, to be taking instruction from a man that beat his opponent. But you can, now that Martin Fraser's also moved over to Team Compton, what changes has he made in the time the time in between his last match? So, I think there's some benefit there, but at the end of the day, he's fighting a man who's never fought before, and he's going to need to be adaptable when he gets in there and put his best foot forward.
Like we said, so many storylines coming to this one, not least obviously the middleweight title being on the line, but the bad blood, the fact that we've got Darcy Vindy, who is of course, a training partner at that team fight at the Fight Centre with Ben Johnston. Just so many cool things that we can see. Who knows how it's going to go down, but it's at the top of the billing on top of another incredible title fight that we do have. We have Frank Yanowski taking on Teishi Tanaguchi for the flyweight championship. Now, this fight was originally scheduled. Tanaguchi was already on this card. He was set to face off against Shane Parker. Parker, unfortunately, had to withdraw due to injury, but the call was made to Frank the Tank to see if he could come over and save the fight. And not only that, but put his belt on the line in just a couple of weeks' notice. And, of course, Frank the Tank said, hell yeah, let's get it done. So we get another title fight. We've gone from having no title fights in this card to all of a sudden having a middleweight title fight and the flyweight title on the line too. Frank the Tank, talking about this guy, he's a man of few words. He's Frank the Tank, but I don't think there's a more popular fighter pound for pound in the country right now. And that's evidenced by every time he walks out at the HBS Stadium in Perth, Western Australia. The Frank the Tank chants. I don't think there's anything louder in Australian mixed martial arts right now. He's certainly beloved over there in Perth. He's really bounced back nicely in his career too to capture this flyweight championship. Of course, he had that setback in his first loss against Anthony Drillich at Eternal 80. But this will be his first title defense after capturing the belt at Eternal 87 against Colton Kilbasa. That was a really well-earned, hard-fought win over an opponent that had just relentless grappling and relentless takedowns. A lot of that fight wasn't going his way until he completely changed the direction of that fight in the opening minute of the fourth round, I believe it was. Just a massive win at the middle on the chin that dropped Colton Kilbasa, and he took his back and finished that off with the rear naked choke. You called this knee, I think, just before it happened, Matt. When I went back and watched the fight, you noticed that he was feigning that knee up the middle. You were able to go over to Perth and see that go down in person. Your words in that moment and how well that set Frank up for the next phase of his career in this next fight coming up.
Yeah, what kind of underpins that moment is a characteristic that you could attribute to Jankowski. He's just incredibly resilient, and it's not the first time that he's come back from being in a bad place in a fight and managed to get the job done. He's really, really hard to put away. He's got incredibly adept submission defense. He's got a chin on him, and he was getting steamrolled. That's the reality. He's Colton Kilbasa, whether you hate it or love it, that style, he was absolutely steamrolling Frank the Tank. And it looked like Frank was out of that fight, but he hung on. He took good instructions from Steve Walton in between rounds and found a moment. There was a window there when he was on the feet every time where he had to be able to find something before he was put back on his back, and he found it. So that speaks to his championship medal, I think. Look.
Yeah, and of course, we talk about Takeshi as well coming to this fight. He is coming with a 4-1 pro record out of Japan. 3 of his 4 wins by way of finish as well. He appears to be a bit of a submission threat, of course, because he's got a couple of rear naked chokes to his name. But he's just another great example, too, of Eternal MMA fostering this relationship that we're seeing with a lot of these other Asian nations with their fighters coming over and giving our fighters and our champions some great fights. And on that note, he could end up being the second Japanese Eternal MMA champion alongside Kuya Ito, who, of course, won the bantamweight title against Rod Costa back at Eternal 85. So we're getting these guys coming over and taking our belts back with them, but they're absolutely loving it, and we're enjoying seeing this relationship being fostered with these guys that are coming over from Korea and Japan. So it's going to be an incredibly cool thing to see for this flyweight title. Thank you to Frank Yanowski for coming and putting that title on the line. Given that Frank is the champion, I'm not too sure how much you know about Takeshi, given that he's an international fighter, but anything in this fight that you think is going to be a key in order for Frank to get this job done and retain the title and keep it here in Australia?
Yeah, I do. Firstly, just an interesting backstory with Takeshi. I know a fair bit about him. So he's normally a bantamweight, so he's had all his fights at bantamweight. The format, so he's from Shuto Gym in Kobe, and they fight on a promotion over there that has slightly different rule set than us. So they go 2 by 5 minute rounds. So all his fights have actually been 2 by 5 minute rounds, which is something pretty unusual. We're not familiar with that down here under the unified rules of MMA. So this will be his first time fighting more than 2 rounds in a championship, no less, and at a weight class down. Well, there's been some changes in his life. He originally came out to Australia as a tourist. He loved it here so much that through a connection with Miles and Jesse at CMBT, that connection being his jiu-jitsu coach, an Australian Billy Hooker, he managed to organise to come and move his life down here with his girlfriend. So he's actually been training in Australia at CMBT, and by all accounts, he's made some huge improvements to his game ever since he got here. So he's a really dangerous opponent for Frank Jankowski, which makes it a bit tricky for Frank, given that he's made so much changes. So the keys to the fight, like some of those are going to be tangible, some won't be, because we haven't seen tape on a recent Taki. So look, the keys for Frank always come down to his ability to kick at range. He's got an excellent kicking game. He's positionally sound. As I mentioned, very strong submission defense, which will be important going up against the Japanese fighter who doesn't mind a front headlock attack, whether it be Das or anaconda or guillotine. You need to weaponize those attributes to try and ward off the rampaging Japanese fighter. I think he needs to maintain the distance and dictate the pace of the fight. Given that Teishi hasn't fought the long form, I'd be looking for Frank to Frank the Tank to dig in deep, take this one to deep waters and see if he can get him out of there late.
Well, that'll be one of two title fights, like we said, that we've got going down on that incredibly stacked Eternal 91 card. But we've got, pardon me, sorry, the throat's a little bit dry. Here, I'll just give it a quick clear. We've got an incredible main card that certainly precedes that. We've got, who did we have? We got Don Marfan versus Tom Pratt in the lightweight division. Another incredible fight. Don Marfan, like one of those guys that, I mean, if it wasn't for a man named Quillan Solkilled, we very well might see... very well might see Don Marfan already as a lightweight champion in this country. Of course, Quillan Solkilled is responsible for the two lone losses on Don Marfan's record. He's a very credentialed grappler, is Don Marfan. We certainly know that. We know what he's looking to do inside the cage. He's won over 50 medals in competition grappling. He's absolutely suffocating on the ground inside the cage. And it's also no surprise that his striking is really starting to catch up with his grappling too. We just shone some light on the guys down at Team Compton Training Centre. Of course, that's where Don Marfan cuts his teeth with guys like Tom Nolan, with guys like Blair Bratag. That's also fighting on this card. John Martin Fraser, of course, on this card is down there plying his trade at the moment there too. So can only expect maybe some more big things in terms of the striking part of his game. We talked about that he did have a couple of those losses against Quillan Solkilled, most notably in that title fight, but he's bounced back in a big way, back in the win column with a win over Tim Rogers at Eternal 86. Finished the fight by slicing the forehead of Tim open with devastating ground and pound. An elbow that happened, I think, merely a foot away from you, Matt Williams. I'm sure you can still taste the blood from that one. But just, again, curious to get first your memory on that particular fight and just that vicious elbow and how well that set him up coming into this fight against Tom Pratt.
Yeah, well, I love a good elbow. And there's been a change in Don Marfan over the course of his journey as a pro, and he's a really so Don Marfan, when you actually have a chat to him outside of the cage, he's a really nice fella and
Sure
quite
is.
softly spoken, and I think that the mantle, the street border is really apt and really suits him. There's been a bit of a change in terms of his intentions. When he's in there, you can noticeably see him trying to break his opponents. He's trying to break their will, force their will, and he doesn't go too soon. It's kind of like he's got a sense of when they're ready to go, and then he puts it on them for the finish. And that elbow was a beautiful highlight reel. And thanks for MCT for letting me finish that one off and tie that one up in a bow. That was a pretty moment. But in terms of how it sets him up, well, the landscape of lightweight is moving very quickly, isn't it? Like you say, the kryptonite of Don Marfan has been Quillan Solkilled, is now off to UFC 312 in Sydney. He's fighting Jubilee, who's an identical record. That's a really interesting fight in its own right. Well, we had Martinez, who couldn't get his act together and make weight, so he's moved up. Becker, well, he's on a 2-fight win streak, absolutely smashing through people. We had that cancelled fight versus the Japanese guy Daiichi Koima last month, but and now with Harry Webb, presumably out for a while with his injuries, it's pretty interesting to see kind of what's next. If Don Marfan puts on a really good show here, you've got him and Jack Becker kind of waiting in the wings, two really, really big lightweights who love to grapple. And Harry Webb, probably on the smaller side, and 3 of his wins have come against essentially featherweight. So what would it look like to have the human highlight reel up against 2 of these big grapplers? I guess we'll find out in the future. But that win against Tim Rogers, has really set Don Marfan up for this fight and whatever lies beyond it.
Certainly has some great insight in terms of how wide open that lightweight division now seems, given everything you just mentioned. Quillan Solkill moving on, Harry Webb on the sidelines after that incredible fight against Kevin Coppermell. There's just so many cool things that we could see potentially happen in the lightweight division. And I mean, so long as Don Marfan's around in this country, I mean, the skills that he has at such a young age, I mean, you could damn near throw him in a title fight after 1 win. He is that good. He just needs to find that opponent. It isn't Quillan Solkill that he can get through and be able to carve out his own story, but he comes up against this one. It comes into Eternal 91 against Tom Pratt, fighting out of Progression MMA in Canberra under Duke Didier. He lost in his pro debut against, I believe it was Taser Malone, but since then he has gone on a 4-fight winning streak, and he's looked pretty damn good doing it. He's got some finishes there. He's got wins over the guys like Kobe Porter, who's competed a number of times for Eternal MMA, and other guys competing on this card. All 4 of those wins have come by way of stoppage for Tom Pratt. So he's certainly keen to take some of that shine from Don Marfan. I no doubt he'd probably be coming in probably as a bit of an underdog in this fight. But Tom Pratt is coming to fight. He's a bit of an entertainer. He's good on the mic. He's good with the skills. He's promotable. He's good everywhere. Your thoughts on what Tom Pratt is bringing to this equation?
Yeah, well, anyone who spends time with Duke Didier down in Canberra is going to be a good talker. It's just about, especially when they get out of Canberra and Duke gives them a moment where they can actually have a little bit of airtime. He's a good friend of mine, but the bloke can talk. Tom Pratt, mate, the kid's good. The kid's good. How good? We're yet to find out, I guess. I was just looking at his tapology then, and again, it's a question about strength of schedule. Of course, he had Kobe Porter, who's turning into a bit of a veteran. He's a real workhorse. It seems like he's fighting every second Saturday. But the combined record of his opponents is 3-2, and if you combine that to Don Marfan, it's 18-9. So there's a big difference in terms of the caliber of the opponents, but you can't argue with the 100% finish rate that Tom Pratt has. He's very tall and long, as we saw in his fight against Taser Malone. When he gets that jab going, it's very difficult to negate. Duke Didier, of course, I believe he was in the Australian national team, maybe the Commonwealth Games team as a judoka. So he's got the grappling on the inside. Those guys are always great up against the cage. Interesting to see how Tom Pratt looks, arguably one of the top 2 or top 3 guys in the lightweight division, and Don Marfan.
Certainly an intriguing fight in the lightweight division. That fight will be coming after an incredibly exciting fight in the middleweight division. We've got Blair Brazier, one of the guys we just talked about out of Team Compton Training Centre, fighting against Cam Rosen, who has recently competed over on Dana White's Contender Series. But as far as Blair goes, I don't know if he's got a nickname yet, but I'm dubbing Blair with the nickname No Time Brazier, because he's barely clocked over 1 minute in 4 pro fights so far in his career. He's never seen the end of round 1, be it through his 3 wins or through the 1 loss. All 3 of his wins have come by KO. 2 of those, interestingly enough, both on exactly the 39-second mark. And I mean, last time we had him on the podcast here, lied through his teeth to me and told me on the podcast that he believes his fight with Nick Kepu was going to be absolute fight of the night. There was going to be a bloody war. But ultimately, he would finish that fight inside 39 seconds. So no time, Blair Brazier is what I'm dubbing him going forward. Already blessed with scary power in both of his hands. But throw the fact that he trains at Team Compton with that room full of killers that you talked about before. You've got a recipe for absolute carnage here. Coming in against Cam Rosen, who, of course, trains under Eugene Berriman at the world's premier striking gym in City Kickboxing. 8 of his 9 wins have come by the way of finish too. He can get it done absolutely everywhere. But he, pardon me, sorry, this dust allergy is getting to me here. Apologies for the viewers. But he can get it done anywhere. He's a big-time submission threat in his own right, with 6 of his wins coming by way of submission. Like I said, fans will recall that he had his time on Dana White's Contender Series in August this year. Unfortunately, that fight didn't go his way, lost that fight by decision. Signed back up here to take a fight in Australia for the first time, making his Eternal MMA debut In between that, he took a little side quest back home, back over where he's training in New Zealand and snuck in a win over there while he had this one scheduled. But he came out unscathed, and he's coming against Blair Britag looking to firmly get himself back into the international picture. So we've got the up-and-comer Blair Britag against the guy that's trying to already make a run on the international scene is Cam Rosen. So a very intriguing picture there. You know about these guys quite well, Matt Williams. Especially keen to get some of your thoughts on this fight in the middleweight division.
Yeah, isn't it middleweight kind of heating up? It was quieter than an underwater trumpet there for a while, but now it just seems to be kind of the fastest moving division in the eternal ranks. Cam Rolston, well, yeah, I originally became familiar with him as a kickboxer on King of the Ring. King of the Ring is a tournament style kind of tuxedo and fine dining event in New Zealand. It's one of the biggest shows. Guys like Israel Adesanya cut their teeth there. Blood Diamond came through there. Dan Hooker won a tournament light heavyweight there, I believe. And Cam Rolston at 193 centimeters came to my attention naturally because he was so tall and the bloke could throw down. So Cam Rolston, well, he can mix it up on the feet, but he's an excellent submission threat. He's finished a lot of his fights by submission. His last fight, you mentioned he ducked back to New Zealand to punch on after his loss on Dana White's Contender Series, where he finished it by calf slicer. Yeah. Calf slicer, you don't see too many calf slicer finishes in professional MMA, and glad he got that one because it means that he's good to go versus Blair Britag. Did you see his fight on Dana White's Contender Series?
I did see the fight, but I mean, my memory's poor. But from memory, he was fighting against that real short guy. I think we talked about this briefly off camera. So I did see it, but it was trying to look at my phone while I was also at work, trying to keep an eye on it at the same time. Yeah. Yeah,
well, he fought a guy called Torres Finny, who's a two-time Tennessee state champion. He's 5'8" middleweight. Versus 193 centimeter Cam Rolston, and he looks like a sock full of ball bearings. He's
he's like real muscle man, isn't he? Like it's that little He's come back to me.
Cam Rolston has some great moments in that fight, but it was the most unusual looking thing ever. Well, he's got a very different style fight tonight, next weekend, doesn't he? As he takes on Blair Britag, who has quickly shown himself to be probably the most devastating striker in the division, and you can't argue with a string of first-round finishes. But, I guess the question here is, what does Blair Britag look past 39 seconds? Like great things can happen in 39 seconds, as you know, Luke. But, I'm excited to see what Blair Britag looks like beyond the first round.
I'm excited to see that too, but I mean, like, you just can't call it either way. I mean, given sort of, the credentials that Cam Rosen has and how well he's done throughout his career before trying to make it big on the international scene. And Blair Britag still just 4 fights under his belt. We just, as we said, we haven't seen him go the distance yet. We don't know what he's like across 3 rounds, let alone beyond sort of the first round. But an interesting clash in terms of these gyms, in terms of an incredible striking gym in Team Compton Training Centre, and of course in Cam Rosen training out of City Kickboxing New Zealand, and they're not too bad with the striking over there in City Kickboxing as well. So there's just so many different interesting little facets in this matchup. Is it going to be the power of Blair Britag once again? Is it going to be the striking out of City Kickboxing with Cam Rosen, or is it going to be his submission threat on the ground? I don't think we've seen Blair being tested in that sort of way at the moment. And like you said, very interesting times in the middleweight division too. I can't remember the analogy you used, something about a trumpet underwater being not as slow as that, but I mean, that's we've got it finally heating up in the middleweight division finally here in this country, of course, being highlighted by that title fight at the top of the card. So some interesting propositions here and some interesting things that might come out of this fight and some implications for that title fight, certainly. But that one comes after we've got Kobe Porter, a man we just mentioned before, fighting against Campbell Symes. Kobe Porter, 3-4 at this part of his career, spent pretty much the entire part of his career, or the entire pro part of his career, fighting for Eternal MMA. I think it was just the last fight that he spent outside of Eternal MMA. Notable wins for Kobe Porter over the guys like Jordan Thomas and Nam Steven back in 2023. But coming off back-to-back losses in his last 2 fights, sort of put him on the back foot a little bit in this point in his career. Sounds like a bit of a funny thing to say, or maybe a bit of a silly thing to say, but I think I said this a couple of fights ago, but Kobe just doesn't seem like a guy that's, under the 500 mark for his career as a professional. Like, he's got some really good skills, very tough and durable guy. You talked about strength of schedule. He certainly had that. So I would fully expect at some point in his career, depending on what he wants to make of it, that he will eventually get over the 500 mark and start putting some more wins. But I don't think he's ever been in a boring fight. Has Kobe Porter, and win or lose, just an incredibly tough and durable guy who always gives a fantastic account of himself. But he is in desperate need of a win coming up at Eternal 91 when he comes up against Campbell Symes, who's originally from Broken Hill in New South Wales, but now trains and resides over in Thailand with the team at Southside MMA over there. He moved over there as a teenager and hasn't looked back since. Interesting little fact about Campbell Symes. He actually holds a world record for the longest Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu roll ever, beating a previous record of 24 hours with a roll effort of 30 hours, all in the name of charity. That was a very interesting little thing that I learned about Campbell Symes. You can look that up. That is an incredible effort. I don't know how you roll for 30 hours. Apparently, they got 1 minute interval breaks in case they needed to, go take a leak or whatever they had to do. But 30 hours, my God, I'm not doing 1 hour, let alone 30 hours. But he holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's also a Pan-Pacific and Pan-Asian champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so we certainly know where he's going to be dangerous in the cage. But this is another fun little matchup in the lightweight division when Kobe Porter takes on Campbell Symes. What are you thinking about this one, Matt?
It's a classic matchup of like your pure jiu-jitsu guy, Campbell Symes, black belt. He's had a couple of fights. One over in Bali and one somewhere in Thailand. I think maybe one on Fight Circus if you've been privy to that promotion over in Bangkok. But a very, very good grappler. He's the grappling coach at Southside MMA with the likes of Colton Kilbasa, the wrestling coach, being able to mix it up there to develop his game. Colton Kilbasa, just on a side note, interestingly, will be in Gold Coast. Potentially, he'll have something to say at the end of the Yanowski Teishi fight. That's more still to come there. But
okay.
Maybe they'll fire him out of a cannon into the ring, and he can do something in there. But so Campbell's been developing as a striker versus with Sam Cassidy, such a brilliant striking coach. Worked with guys like Darren Till. In the UFC, is on a plane every second weekend. Spain, Dana White's Contender Series, UFC. He's incredibly skillful, well sought after striking coach. So Campbell would have made some developments there. His jiu-jitsu has its roots with Mick Maloney, I believe, from Mildura Martial Arts, who's produced many good MMA grapplers. So it's not just IBJJF style gi jiu-jitsu. He's got the full kit and caboodle. Very tall, lanky fighter, able to use his range quite well in the fights that I've seen. And he'll need to against Kobe Porter. Like you mentioned, 3 and 4 for Kobe Porter. That just is not a reflection of the caliber of him as a fighter. A lot of his fights have been incredibly close. The fight versus Luke Daly was a close one. Kobe Porter's also been ahead in some fights and has had something, whether it be a decision-making issue or just a stroke of bad luck go against him and ended up with the L. But he's very dangerous, has got an incredible jab, can fight off both feet, can jab well going backwards, which is a skill you don't often see in MMA fighters. Guys like Calvin Kattar in the UFC, Max Holloway, they jab well going backwards. Corey Sandhagen, and he kicks very well from southpaw. So that's going to be a problem for Campbell. Campbell's going to have to try and drag this one to the mat, but he's going to have to walk through the 4-ounce pieces of leather strapped to the fist of Kobe Porter if he wants to do that.
No, fantastic bit of breaking down there. Like you said, like I said, Kobe Porter, just his skills just not very reflective of having a 3 and 4 record. I mean, you can say what you want in terms of a guy's record is what his record is, but yeah, Kobe Porter, definitely one of those guys who is certainly better than that. He's got to get through Campbell Symes, of course. He wants to shore it up even at 500 and go 4 and 4. But Campbell Symes certainly looking to come and continue his 3-fight winning streak. 3-fight winning streak. My apologies. 2-fight winning streak. And keep his own sort of momentum going there as well. We do have a fight that is flying a little bit under the radar for my liking, but the more I look at this fight and the more I recall some of the fights that we've had from Chris Usowski, Conor Burch versus Chris Usowski, my God, I'm looking forward to this one so much. Chris Usowski right now, just one of my favorite fighters on the Australian MMA scene. Conor Burch training, of course, out of Tribal MMA in Queensland. This fight is a bantamweight, but Conor has fought and competed with wins and stoppage wins up as high as welterweight and all the way down through the weight classes on the way down to bantamweight. So he's got stoppage wins at welterweight, lightweight, and featherweight. He made his successful pro debut in August this year at Eternal 87 with a KO win, over Lucas Grasselli in the featherweight division. Now, of course, this fight is going to be at bantamweight. But a beautiful flowing combination of strikes after he kept his opponent guessing with some stance switching against Lucas Grasselli. That was a beautiful combo. Finished that combo with a knee to the body on the way down to the ground. Grasselli had enough, fair enough. So some huge things, some huge potential for Conor Burch. But coming in against Chris Usowski, and I'm glad that he's made the transition away from soccer because this man played national level soccer up until the age of 14 before deciding to turn to mixed martial arts. He did venture into kickboxing a little bit, went 2-0 as an amateur, so undefeated as a kickboxer. But, I mean, the highlight point, and you'll talk about this better than me, this man has incredibly slick boxing. I think pound for pound, one of the best boxers in mixed martial arts that we have in this country. Just elite level technique. Mixed with the power, man. I mean, look, for fans that are watching this, if you haven't seen the fights, just get over to YouTube. His fights are on YouTube right now. His performance at Eternal 74 against James Sargerson systematically broke him down, just picking his shots, ripping to the body. He had the elbows mixed in there, the uppercuts through his guard, the big knee up the middle from the plum clinch as well. Just an absolute chef-kiss performance for my part, for Chris. One of my favorite KOs back in 2023. And for me, he might just have one of the best liver shots in all of Australian MMA, maybe in the world. I'm calling it right now, but shades of my favorite kickboxer of all time, Nicky Holtzkin. He really reminds me of that. With that left rip to the body, he just can't talk highly enough about his boxing. But you were there for his fight against Jawad Rahabi. And that was an incredible fight, but he showed off every facet of his game, not just the boxing, but on the ground as well. And we got treated to something that I've never seen before. I don't know if you guys have ever seen before, but a spinning elbow from guard, if you don't mind, to end that round in that 3-round fight against Jawad Rahabi. I'm high on Chris Usowski big time. I can't wait to see what comes next for him. I love that fight. Very, very keen to get your thoughts on these two guys.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought it up because this is my fight of the night. This isn't for me. Yeah, Chris Usowski. That I believe they call him the Macedonian Hammer out there. At Lions Den, and that's certainly well suited to this bloke and Conor Burch. These two guys have the best MMA boxing in Australia, hands down. I guarantee you that. Conor Burch, well, as a bantamweight, he's got 5 first round TKOs, which and a lot of submissions to boot as well, which is really impressive for a bantamweight. He's been in professional boxing where he's fought professional boxers and cleaned them up too. Some beautiful finishes coming by way of punches to the body. So both these guys can hit the body. They can both fight out of they can fight out of both stances. It's the jab of Chris Usowski out of both stances that is lightning fast, and that helps set up the rest of his offense. You can't tell it's coming, and then he'll throw a little offbeat cross straight down the pipe too when he catches guys square on their feet. Really impressive. And like you talked about his professional soccer career or fight or playing at the top level. Well, he's actually been with Luke since he was 6 years old, I believe. So he started doing the kids classes at Lions Den. So he's stringing those two things along together. And isn't it an interesting thing that guys who play top level soccer often cross over quite well to MMA? I think Jose Aldo played really high level soccer and futsal in Brazil, and it's this ability to be able to move your feet and have coordination and have balance at all times, and to be able to generate power traveling laterally. I think it really suits guys, and it's a great athletic development. This will come down to each boy's ability to control position with their feet, I feel. Whoever, as they shift back and forth, whoever can get the best foot position to strike from, to get an advantage, whoever can put and misdirect their opponent out of position and hit them while they're there, will start to get the better of these exchanges. But both coming off incredible performances. The Jawad Rahabi performance was something else. I've seen Jawad Rahabi fight down here in Victoria, and he's no mug. He is a really good up-and-coming fighter, and to handle him the way that the Macedonian Hammer did is incredibly impressive. That finishing sequence that Connor Burch put on Lucas Gracilli in Perth was one of my favourite all-time finishes in Eternal MMA. It was just so slick, so patient, and to do that on debut was nothing short of sensational.
Yeah, it was. I went back and watched that last night too, and just like the way he sort of had him confused with sort of that switch of the stance and that sort of thing before he unloaded with a couple of those strikes. So the call you made there in terms of these guys being like just the best boxers that we have in MMA right now should be enough to set up fans to want to tune in for this one. I mean, obviously get yourself on UFC Fight Pass and check out this card coming up. But I mean, get over to YouTube and check out these guys' fights as well, because they're up on YouTube. Chris Usowski just with some absolutely fantastic performances. And I mean, still so early in their career for these boys, but I mean, they look like veterans with their game already, just so well-rounded. And you making the call that it could end up being fight of the night. I'm not going to bet against you on that one there. We get to sit back and be the beneficiaries of that one and see how it all goes down. Who's going to come out with the win? I don't know, but I'm sure we're in for an absolute treat there in that bantamweight division as well. And I mean, we had just that the one fight left to talk about on the main card. Of course, we've got some amazing prelims before that. So before that, make sure you get over to Eternal MMA and check out those prelims before this fight. But we do have Cole Smith on pro debut in mixed martial arts. He's fighting against Jordan Gamble, who is 0-2 so far in his career. But Cole Smith, a man that has spent the large time of his career, or over the last couple of years, 2022 up until now, boxing professionally. This, of course, like we said, is his pro debut. We have seen him one time, though, in the Eternal MMA cage. He fought against a man, Ash Prendergast, my apologies, who owns and operates Veterans MMA in a clash of military veterans. Both he and Ash, of course, former servicemen for their respective countries, for Australia and New Zealand. So that fight was a bit of a platform for a terrific cause to raise awareness for the veterans of this country and also New Zealand, and provide a bit of a path for them to help veterans re-assimilate back into society through the channels of mixed martial arts. So to have those two guys sort of fight back then and shine a bit of a light on this cause to get veterans into gyms and find a new pathway. I know things are going very well at Veterans MMA and just turning the lives around for some of these guys. And Cole Smith was very much, while he's not involved in that gym, of course, he had that fight to help raise awareness for that. So he's coming in to make his pro debut and see what he can do in the pro side of things for mixed martial arts. Taking on Jordan Campbell, who's 0-2 in this part of his career. But he's training out of the Lions Den, so we know the caliber of the guys at the Lions Den, no doubt looking to help him get his first pro win. But this is certainly an interesting fight between Cole Smith and Jordan Campbell to kick off what is an absolutely incredible main card for Eternal 91.
Yeah, familiar with both these guys. Cole Smith, well, there were some really good signs from Cole Smith in that fight. I think it was the weight cut that ended up kind of taking its toll as the fight went on. I think he missed weight and ended up losing a point, I believe, in the first round from memory.
Yes.
He started to tire as the fight went on. Ash Pendergrass, a massive physical specimen.
He's a huge man.
Yeah, huge man.
Yeah.
But Cole Smith's boxing is top notch, top tier, and he's developed it quite well for MMA. He certainly did in that fight. But it's been 6 times that he's climbed over the boxing ring ropes between that fight and now, as a professional, no doubt. So he's got the skills, and by all accounts, there's no problems weight-wise coming into this one. So he'll be looking to implement the hands. That's no secret. One of the tricky things is when you adapt your boxing to MMA, it's much different cutting off a cage than it is cutting off a boxing ring with 4 corners. So that's a skill in itself. So cage control will be a must for Cole Smith. He'll be looking to back Jordan Gamble up and put hands on him. Jordan Gamble, he's a very good grappler. I believe he's a brown belt, very tall It's a chips all in moment for Gamble. That's a pun. You take it or leave it. But at 0-2, he's a really tricky proposition probably for matchmakers. Because he's another one of these guys. He's very good, and there's not a lot in it for guys to take a fight against a really good 0-2 guy. It doesn't look great on your Tapology if you win. It looks terrible if you lose. So he's a real nightmare in that regard, and a dangerous fight for guys to take without a lot to show for it. So well done to Cole Smith for stepping up. A big, tall fighter, usually fights at a southpaw, or predominantly anyway, is a very strong kicking game. And I think that's the key to victory for this one, Luke, to kick the arms of Cole Smith, to kick the wrist from southpaw, try and take some power out of those arms. Try and find Cole Smith in his boxing stance a little bit too linear, and kick the calf, and then find an opportunity to drag this one to the mat. See what Cole Smith's made from when it hits the ground. Really, really interesting stylistic matchup between these two.
Now that fight goes down in the welterweight division, kicking off that epic main card that we have for Eternal 91, which follows hot on the heels of the card we've got the night before at Eternal 90. Just 2 title fights at the top of this billing, of course. John Martin Fraser, like we said, taking on Darcy Vendy. Frank Yanowski versus Teishi Tanaguchi for the flyweight championship. Of course, we've got the returning Brenton Mumford on the Eternal 90 card there too. So if you haven't got your tickets already, or if you only got tickets to one of those events, get tickets to both those events, eternalma.com. I know they're going pretty damn fast, but if you're not turning up live and in person, of course, you've got those cards both streaming live and exclusive on UFC Fight Pass. So make sure you sign up and tune into some amazing fights. I've never seen 2 stacked cards like this back to back. I mean, weeks apart, 2 days apart with just some incredible fights. There's not an ounce of fat. I'm telling you right now, this is not a biased view, and I'm sure Matt Williams can attest to this. Every single one of these fights on the main card, the more you look at it, the more you dig into it, the more we get fantastic breakdown and insight from guys like Matt Williams. You just really start to peel back the layers and see just how high level all of these fights are, and we get the prelims as well. We know how much the prelims are really starting to come up, and these amateur fighters that we're seeing through the ranks here in Australia, it's just absolute recipe for good things going down. A lot of fireworks are going to be in this one. There's bad blood at the top of the pile with the middleweight fight. Can't wait for that one. So many good things going down. And we're going to be there. Matt Williams is going to be in the commentary booth. I'll be there doing something. Who knows what I'll be doing, but come and say good day. Come and check out these fights. Going to be an incredible weekend, and what a way to finish off the year 2024 as we roll into 2025. And I'm sure we'll do this all again, man. How about we see these fights, we see how it goes down. We'll get back on. We'll talk about who won, who lost, and all the implications that come out of those fights. It's been a pleasure doing this here with you once again after Eternal 90, doing it all again for Eternal 91. We'll do it again soon.
Matt, my pleasure. Love the podcast. I love the work that you're doing. Love Eternal MMA. This one will sow the seeds for a huge 2025. Can't wait to see what the future holds.